The night Jason Reed transferred the last $20 million from his joint account with his wife, he thought he was escaping failure. He had no idea that the failed designer he just abandoned was actually the hidden billionaire CEO who signed his paychecks. While he celebrated his engagement to his wealthy boss, Victoria Hale, believing he'd traded struggle for status, Elena Carter Reed sat alone in the dim light of their empty office. The same office that secretly operated as the headquarters of Aurelia Holdings, a global conglomerate she'd built in silence for nearly a decade. At 9:43 p.m., as Jason and Victoria toasted champagne over stolen millions, an email hit his inbox. He never opened a confidential board notice reading, Aurelia Holdings CEO to assume full control of Hale Tech pending merger approval. But he was too busy whispering promises of forever to the woman who'd soon be standing in front of cameras, flaunting his stolen fortune, to notice that the empire he thought belonged to his boss had always been his wife's. He emptied her account. He mocked her failure. He left her for power. But what happens when he discovers she was the power, the very empire he betrayed? How would the man who traded his wife for wealth react when the broken woman he discarded became the only one who could destroy his new marriage, his company, and his name? And what would Elena Carter Reed do when the husband who stole everything realized he'd been living off her empire all along? Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, please click subscribe. Every single click helps us tell stories of courage and truth. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because when we share these stories together, we remind each other that even in pain, we can rise. Elena Carter Reed was 35, the kind of woman who carried calm like armor. To the world, she was a soft-spoken interior designer whose business had folded under bad timing. To those who mattered, and there were very few, she was the silent architect behind Aurelia Holdings, a private investment empire born out of grief and persistence after her mentor Arthur Lynn's death. But no one ever saw that side of her, not even Jason. Their marriage had begun 12 years earlier, when Jason was a smooth-talking corporate salesman with a dazzling smile and no savings, and Elena was an ambitious dreamer building her first design firm from their one-bedroom apartment. He had charm. She had vision. Together, they'd seemed unstoppable. But success reveals cracks long before failure does. That morning, the marble floors of their house gleamed like nothing had gone wrong, except for the silence between them. Jason stood by the window, scrolling through messages, his expensive watch glinting under the sunlight. He was 38, fit, polished, and utterly intoxicated by power. His boss, Victoria Hale, had been grooming him for months. Not for promotion, but possession. "Don't wait up tonight," Jason muttered, tightening his tie. "Victoria needs me at the office." Elena looked up from the invoices scattered across the table. The office or her penthouse? Her voice didn't tremble, it simply cut through the air. He didn't answer. He never did anymore. As the door closed, Elena's hand brushed against a small leather notebook, the one Arthur Lynn had given her years ago. Inside, her handwriting curved in blue ink. "Stay invisible until it's necessary to be seen." She pressed her thumb over the line, a faint smile breaking through the fatigue. That was Arthur's rule, and her survival. For months, whispers of a merger between Hale Tech and Aurelia had been circulating. To Jason, it was just another ladder to climb. To Elena, it was an omen. She knew Victoria Hale, 40s, poised, ruthless, the kind of woman who never looked directly at someone she considered beneath her. Once, Elena had met her at a charity dinner. Victoria's perfume had filled the air like a warning. "Your husband speaks highly of you," Victoria had said then, her lips curving in a smile that never reached her eyes. "I suppose every man needs a muse." Now, months later, Jason would become that woman's trophy, and Elena the discarded muse. The phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from the joint bank account blinked. Her breath caught $20 million withdrawn in a single transaction. She opened the banking app, the digits spinning down to zero. Transfer recipient, Victoria Hale. Authorized by Jason Reed. Her knees weakened. For a moment, she felt her heartbeat in her throat, not from shock but recognition. She'd known this day was coming. She just hoped he'd choose differently. When she walked into the bank 2 hours later, she was met with polite regret. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reed," the manager said softly. Your husband had full authorization. The funds are gone. Outside, the wind bit her face. She stared at the city skyline towers of glass and ambition. She'd helped design one of those buildings years ago, back when Jason still believed in her dreams. Now he's stealing them, she thought. Flashback. She saw herself younger, in worn jeans, sitting across from Arthur Lynn in his office. He'd been old then, frail but brilliant, his voice barely a whisper. Elena, power isn't about showing the world your strength. It's about knowing when to let them think you're weak. That lesson had built her empire. Aurelia Holdings wasn't just a company. It was a fortress of carefully hidden subsidiaries. Tech, real estate, finance, all operating under names Jason had never questioned. He thought her late nights were desperation. They were dominion. The sound of laughter snapped her back. Across the street, a newsstand played a clip on its screen. Jason Reed and Victoria Hale spotted at dinner rumored engagement. Jason's hand rested possessively on Victoria's thigh as cameras flashed. Elena didn't flinch. She just whispered, "Perfect timing." When she returned home that evening, the rooms already looked different. His suit's gone, drawers empty, scent erased. On the dining table sat a note in Jason's handwriting. "You'll be fine, Elena. I need a woman who understands business." She folded the note neatly, slipped it into a drawer, and opened her laptop. The Aurelia interface glowed blue. Her login name read simply, E.C.L. A message from her executive assistant appeared on screen. "Ma'am, Hale Tech has proposed a 40% equity trade in the merger. They believe Aurelia's owner is a foreign investor. Shall we proceed as planned?" Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then she typed, "Proceed," and prepare the correction files. It's time. The scene lingered on her face, calm, distant, dangerous. Far away, in a penthouse lined with crystal and deception, Jason lifted a glass of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking glasses with Victoria. Victoria smirked. "To upgrades." But as the camera panned over their laughter, the reflection in the window flickered. The city skyline they celebrated was owned by Aurelia Holdings, by her. Elena sat in silence, the faint hum of her computer echoing like a heartbeat. The words from Arthur's final letter glowed on her desk lamp. "One day, they'll mistake silence for defeat. Let them. Silence is your storm before the strike." She closed the notebook, leaned back, and whispered, "Let's see how loud silence can be." The faint glimmer of her wedding ring caught the light before she slipped it off, setting it beside the monitor. A tiny circle of gold that once symbolized love, now redefined as evidence. For the first time in years, her eyes hardened, not from anger, but from clarity. The story of her failure was about to become the story of his ruin. Send to the clean out. The morning began with a single vibration, the kind that slices through silence like a warning. Elena's phone buzzed once, twice, then again. She blinked at the screen, still half asleep, the taste of bitter coffee from last night clinging to her mouth. Bank alert, $20 million withdrawal, joint account. For a moment, her mind refused to process the number. The room around her, the unmade bed, the half-folded laundry, the photo of her and Jason at the ribbon cutting of her failed boutique all blurred into static. Then her pulse started to hammer. "No," she whispered, scrolling through the notifications, each line confirming the same transfer. Recipient, Victoria Hale. Authorized by Jason Reed. Her hand trembled, but her face hardened, controlled. The training of a woman who'd spent a lifetime hiding storms behind calm eyes. She threw on a coat, the morning light spilling through the blinds like an interrogation. Cut to the bank lobby, pristine marble, air-conditioned detachment. Ease with apologetic eyes, shuffled papers as if the motion itself could soften betrayal. "Mrs. Reed," he said gently, "the transfer was authorized with full credentials. There's nothing we can reverse." Elena's voice barely rose above a whisper. "He moved all of it?" He nodded. "Every cent." The pen in her hand cracked between her fingers. She stared at the shards of plastic, watching the ink bleed into her palm, a small, quiet symbol of what he'd done. Cut to Jason's new world, a penthouse glittering with glass and greed. Victoria Hale lounged on a cream sofa, barefoot, sipping champagne at 10 in the morning. Jason, in a tailored suit, watched his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. He grinned. 20 million, he said, swirling his glass. I told you she'd fold the moment real pressure hit. She was my charity project, Vic. You're my upgrade. Victoria's laugh was low, practiced. You think money makes you my equal, Jason? He slid an arm around her waist. It's a start. Behind them, the skyline shimmered, every tower quietly owned by Aurelia Holdings, Elena's empire. Cut back. Elena leaving the bank. The automatic doors opened to the noise of the street, but everything sounded distant, like she was underwater. Flashback. She's younger, exhausted, surrounded by blueprints and invoices, Jason asleep on the couch while she worked through the night. She just landed her first silent partnership deal with Lynn Financial, back before anyone knew the name Aurelia. She remembered the email from Arthur Lynn himself. We build in the dark, Elena. Let them see light only when it blinds them. Back in the present, she stands at a crosswalk, phone still in her hand, thumb hovering over Jason's contact. The screen lights up with their wedding photo, his smile bright, her eyes hopeful. For one heartbeat, she almost calls. Then her thumb slides down, deleting his number instead. Her expression doesn't break, but the faintest tremor runs through her lips before she steadies herself. The high of their love, the crash of betrayal, the stillness after impact, a perfect rhythm for retention, for empathy. The camera lingers on her reflection in a store window. The woman the world thinks is ruined. Then her reflection blinks, a flicker of steel beneath the surface. Inside the penthouse, Jason's phone buzzes. A notification he ignores flashes briefly before the screen goes dark. Incoming wire verification, Aurelia Holdings internal transfer. He laughs, pouring more champagne. Cheers to the new chapter. But Elena's quiet voice overlays the scene like a ghost. You just opened the final chapter, Jason. The music dips to silence, the emotional low before the next storm, as the audience is left wondering how a failed designer ever had 20 million to lose, and what she'll do now that it's gone. The ticking clock in Mr. Harris's office was merciless. Each click sounded like a countdown to something Elena couldn't yet name. Papers were spread across his desk, legal printouts, transfer logs, joint account authorizations, and the final verdict written in impersonal ink. No recovery. Funds transferred under mutual consent. Mr. Harris, a seasoned lawyer in his 60s with eyes that had seen every kind of betrayal, leaned back and sighed. I've reviewed everything twice, Mrs. Reed, because his name was on the account and he signed the transfer willingly. There's nothing the court can undo. Elena didn't blink. She stared at the document, the black letters swimming across the page. Her voice, when it came, was steady, the kind of calm that only arrives when the soul is too tired to break again. So, it's gone. I'm afraid so. He hesitated, studying her. But maybe this isn't the end. Her lips curved into something almost like a smile. It never is. As she rose, her hand brushed against the edge of the mahogany desk, and suddenly the world blurred, the scent of fresh coffee, the creak of a wooden chair, a flashback pulling her 8 years into the past. She was 27 again, standing inside an aging office where sunlight slanted through dusty blinds. Across the table sat Arthur Lynn, her mentor, frail but brilliant, his silver hair a halo against the glow of afternoon light. The world knew him as a reclusive investor. She knew him as the man who taught her how to build without applause. You're young, Arthur had said, sliding a folder toward her. Inside were the founding documents of a small, nameless startup. Aurelia Dynamics, he said. A quiet venture. You'll fund it, own it, and no one will ever know until you choose. She'd frowned then. Why the secrecy? Arthur's answer became the spine of her life. Power whispers, Elena. The day you speak, make sure it's final. Back to the present. The memory cracked apart like glass. She found herself staring at the city through Mr. Harris's window, towers rising, indifferent, beautiful. Those same towers were built with her money, her risk, her decisions. Yet everyone saw only Jason's ambition and her supposed failure. A single tear escaped, tracing down her cheek before she brushed it away. It wasn't grief for the money. She had built fortunes before and could do it again. It was grief for the years she had mistaken dependency for partnership. She whispered, half to herself, half to the ghost of Arthur Lynn. I should have known he'd mistake silence for weakness. Outside, thunder rumbled, distant, restrained. Mr. Harris looked up, concerned. Are you sure you'll be all right? Elena turned toward the door, her voice cool, almost detached. I will be when this silence ends. As she stepped into the elevator, her reflection in the mirrored doors looked different. The same woman, but with eyes no longer clouded by illusion. The low hum of the descending lift merged with the echo of Arthur's words again, now layered with quiet promise. The day you speak, make sure it's final. Her lips parted just slightly. Then it's time to prepare my voice. The doors opened, light flooding in a soft, rising swell that hinted not at collapse, but the beginning of something far greater. Gold light spilled across the ballroom, catching the crystals that hung like frozen raindrops from the ceiling. The cameras flashed relentlessly, each click a bullet of attention Jason had always craved but never earned on his own. He stood on the crimson carpet, chin lifted, one hand casually possessive on Victoria Hale's waist. The reporters swarmed, shouting over each other. Mr. Reed, is it true you've officially joined Hale Tech as Vice President of Operations? Jason's smile gleamed half arrogance, half relief. It's true. I've finally found a team that values innovation and loyalty. He made sure the word loyalty lingered, a dagger wrapped in charm. Beside him, Victoria's lips curved into a well-rehearsed smile. She looked stunning in emerald silk, every inch the corporate goddess she wanted the world to see. Then came the question that sliced through the champagne haze. And what about Mrs. Reed? A hush followed. For the briefest second, Jason's jaw tightened. Victoria turned gracefully to face the cameras, her expression radiant, voice honeyed and cold all at once. Some women are born to support greatness, she said, pausing just long enough for the words to sting, and others, to envy it. The crowd erupted in polite laughter. Jason forced one too, but the muscles near his temple twitched. Behind them, on a towering digital billboard, shimmered the bright new logo, Aurelia Hale Tech merger talks pending. The letters gleamed gold, unnoticed by most except for the woman watching, from miles away. Cut to Elena's modest apartment. The walls were bare now, most of her furniture sold after the collapse. A soft hum from an old refrigerator filled the silence. On the flickering television screen, Jason's face shone, drunk on power. She sat on the edge of the couch, a simple sweater draped around her shoulders, the only luxury left in her space being the quiet dignity she refused to lose. Her eyes didn't leave the screen as Victoria leaned into Jason, pressing a slow, performative kiss on his lips for the cameras. The host's voice echoed through the TV. And there you have it, the power couple redefining success. Hale Tech's brightest era begins tonight. Elena's gaze sharpened. The Aurelia logo in the corner of the screen pulsed once under the spotlight. She tilted her head, realizing what the reporters didn't. Hale Tech wasn't merging with Aurelia. Hale Tech was trying to buy into it blind to the fact that Aurelia's true owner sat in that tiny apartment holding the remote. A flicker of something crossed her face, grief, resolve, memory, flashback. Jason again, 2 years earlier, pacing their home office. You're too cautious, Elena, he'd said. If we ever get into the big leagues, we'll need sharks like Victoria. She'd smiled softly. Sharks drown when they stop moving, Jason. Just remember that. The memory dissolved. Her eyes returned to the television, to Victoria's gleam, Jason's practiced smirk. The faint reflection of her face merged with theirs on the screen, for a heartbeat that betrayed watching the betrayers pretend to be kings. She whispered under her breath, sharks drown when they stop moving. The phone buzzed beside her, an encrypted notification from Aurelia's private network. Michael Grant. Ma'am, the merger contract draft just arrived. Should I flag it? Her lips parted in a small, dangerous smile. She typed back one word. No. The screen lit her face as she added, almost to herself, let them sign it. The hum of the fridge deepened, the scene slowed. Outside her window, neon light from a distant billboard painted her in gold, the same shade that illuminated Jason and Victoria moments ago. High emotion crested quietly here. Betrayal, composure, and the first spark of revenge. The contrast between his champagne laughter and her silent clarity created a perfect retention pulse. Viewers left breathless, wondering what she was planning next. The television flickered one last time before she turned it off, plunging the room into stillness. In that silence, you could almost hear Arthur Lynn's voice again, calm, prophetic, ghostly. Power whispers, Elena. The day you speak, make sure it's final. Her eyes gleamed as she whispered back to the dark. I'm almost ready to speak. The apartment was nearly dark except for the glow of Elena's laptop screen. Outside, the city exhaled in distant hums. Engines, sirens, the broke. Occasional echo of laughter that felt like it belonged to another world. The digital clock read 11:47 p.m. Her face was calm, but the quiet was deceptive. It was the silence before detonation. She typed in a password so long it could have been a sentence. The screen shifted to black, then filled with cascading code before stabilizing on the seal of Aurelia Holdings' encrypted network, Tier 7 access. Moments later, a secure window flickered open, revealing Michael Grant, her executive assistant. Young, sharp, loyal to a fault, his tie loosened and eyes heavy from long nights. Ma'am, he said, voice low. You need to see this. She leaned closer. Talk to me. Michael shared his screen lines of authorization codes, server access grants, and digital signatures with one name flashing in red. Jason Reed. Hailtech's internal servers show he's been given provisional executive authority over Aurelia-linked accounts. Michael continued. Victoria's team pushed it through after the preliminary merger approval. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Elena's reflection flickered over the data, calm, surgical. Then she said softly, Good. Let him dig his own grave deeper. Her tone didn't rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Michael froze for half a second, recognizing the shift, that razor-thin line where her patience transformed into precision. Elena, he began carefully, if he authorizes anything with those credentials, the paper trail could get messy. That's the point, she replied, eyes fixed on the screen. Messy hands leave fingerprints. A micro cliffhanger pulsed through the scene. Viewers could feel she wasn't panicking, she was positioning. The low-burn tension made every word feel like strategy disguised as stillness. She opened a blank document titled, The Correction Plan. For a moment, her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Then she began, typing methodically, her eyes distant, lost in the rhythmic sound of keystrokes that built her vengeance one word at a time. Flashback. Arthur Lynn again, seated by the window of his estate years ago. His health had been failing, but his mind had never been sharper. You don't fight greed with anger, Elena. You fight it with design. Every fool builds a trap for others. The wise woman designs one where they trap themselves. The memory folded back into the present. Elena's gaze hardened as she typed a line across the top of the document. Correction begins when deception ends. Michael's voice pulled her back. What's the next move? She looked directly into the camera. I want every Hailtech financial transaction mirrored. If Jason so much as sneezes into an account, I want a copy. Michael nodded. Understood. Her expression softened briefly, not with warmth, but focus. And Michael, keep this between us, even if the world burns. He gave a Bren, small, grim smile. Wouldn't be the first time you rebuilt from ashes. The call ended. The apartment returned to silence, but it was no longer heavy, it pulsed, alive with purpose. Elena leaned back, stretching her fingers. The faint hum of her laptop filled the air like a secret heartbeat. On the desk beside it lay a small photograph, her and Jason on their wedding day, laughing, his arms around her waist. She stared at it for a long moment, then quietly turned it face down. As she resumed typing, her reflection on the dark screen aligned with the Aurelia logo. The audience now fully senses she's not just a wronged wife. She's something far greater, but the scale of her power remains veiled. The camera pans slowly from the screen to the window, where the same city skyline Jason flaunted hours ago shimmered, every tower built with her money, her name, her silence. Her voice whispered, half promise, half prophecy. He took 20 million from me. Let's see. What happens when I take everything he stands on? The cursor blinked once, twice, then froze on the final words of her plan. Phase 1. Observation. Phase 2. Correction. Phase 3. Revelation. Lightning flickered outside. The music swelled, not loud but slow, deliberate. The storm had begun. The scene opens not in the present, but in the dim light of a hospital room 8 years earlier. The kind of silence that carries weight, like the pause before an orchestra begins. Monitors beep softly, the scent of antiseptic lingers, and the rain taps gently against the window. Arthur Lynn, once the most enigmatic investor in the private sector, now lies frail, his hand trembling against crisp sheets. Elena, 27 then, sits beside him, clutching a worn notebook filled with sketches and project notes. The exhaustion in her face isn't just from caring for him, it's from the weight of the empire she'd unknowingly built at his side. Arthur's voice is rough, like gravel. You always thought you were building my legacy, didn't you? Elena shakes her head quickly. I built what you envisioned. I just followed your guidance. He smiles faintly, the kind of smile that knows more than it says. No, Elena. I followed you. He gestures weakly to the drawer by his bedside. Open it. She hesitates, then does. Inside lies a sealed black folder, its surface embossed with the Aurelia emblem, the phoenix rising from gold ash. The sight of it makes her chest tighten. Arthur takes a shallow breath. You built Aurelia for me. Now it's yours. Everything, the holdings, the patents, the shell companies, they belong to you. But the world can't know until you decide it's time. Tears pool in her eyes. Arthur, I can't, I'm not. He raises a frail hand, stopping her. You are. You always were. I'm naming you majority shareholder and CEO in trust. Hidden until you sign the release. It's protection for you and for what's coming. The heart monitor clicks steadily as he speaks, each word a drop of time running out. Arthur looks at her, his eyes piercing even in weakness. Power whispers, Elena. The day you speak, make sure it's final. She lowers her head, trembling. Why me? He smiles, softer now. Because you build for people, not applause. The ones who crave attention always destroy what they touch. The camera lingers on his hand as he places the folder into hers, a transfer of destiny, not just documents. Elena stepping out of the hospital later that night. The city glows below her, indifferent and alive. The folder rests against her chest. She looks up at the skyline, where lights blink like constellations of human ambition, and whispers to herself, then I'll build quietly. Elena. Signing anonymous ownership transfers through encrypted systems. Small companies launching under shell names, Green Arc Tech, Noventus Labs, Aurelia Dynamics. Employees smiling in factories, developers pitching ideas, community centers opening, each funded quietly through Aurelia subsidiaries. Her life became the paradox Arthur designed, the invisible billionaire. In one clip, Jason stands behind her, peering at a spreadsheet she quickly closes. What's all that? He asks casually. Just contracts, she answers, smiling faintly. He laughs, patting her shoulder. One day you'll thank me when I make real money. The irony hangs sharp. He never knew he'd been standing beside a woman who controlled a multi-billion-dollar empire. Back to present. Elena stares at the same black folder now resting on her desk, the Aurelia emblem faintly illuminated by lamplight. Arthur's words echo in her mind like a heartbeat. The day you speak, make sure it's final. Her eyes lift toward the skyline visible through her apartment window, the same towers Jason and Victoria now parade beneath. She whispers, soon, Arthur. The wind stirs the papers beside her, flipping one page open. The correction plan, Phase 1 half complete. Her fingers trace the Aurelia logo. The phoenix gleams under her touch, rebirth, waiting for ignition. The frame tightens on her face, calm, resolute, dangerous. The girl from the hospital has vanished. The CEO is finally awake. The ballroom shimmered in golden glass, sunlight filtering through crystal chandeliers as cameras flashed in rhythmic bursts. Reporters moved like a tide of hungry faces, their lenses feeding on vanity and scandal. At the center of it all, Jason Reed basked in his favorite light attention. The charity brunch was meant to raise funds for small business innovation grants, yet the irony was painful. Hale Tech banners hung behind him, flanked by Victoria Hale's immaculate smile, and a table filled with industry executives pretending to care about the less fortunate. Jason lifted his champagne flute. To success, he declared, voice carrying, across the marble hall, and to knowing when to leave failure behind. Laughter rippled through the room. A reporter leaned in, eager for more. Mr. Reed, any comment on your ex-wife's recent bankruptcy filing? Jason smirked. Ah, Elena. She's sentimental, brilliant cook, terrible investor. Some people should have stayed in the kitchen. Business isn't for everyone. The laughter this time was louder, crueler. Even Victoria chuckled softly. though her eyes darted sideways, gauging public reaction. Jason noticed and doubled down. But don't pity her, he added with a grin. She'll land on her feet, maybe running another little art boutique somewhere. The crowd roared. Camera bulbs popped like tiny explosions. And in the far back of the room, nearly invisible, in a simple black dress and no jewelry, Elena watched. Her expression didn't move, not once, but the silence around her thickened. Her fingers brushed the silver pendant Arthur had given her years ago, the one shaped like a phoenix. Her eyes glimmered once in the light, then dimmed back to composure. Flashback, Jason's voice years ago, echoing in memory. You're too serious, Elena. The world doesn't reward people who build quietly. She'd smiled then, cutting vegetables at the counter. Maybe not today, she'd said softly, but it remembers who burned it down. The flashback dissolved. Jason was still laughing on stage, oblivious to the woman he'd just reignited. Hours later, the echo of applause faded into the night. Elena stepped out of the hotel lobby, heels clicking against marble, the city lights painting her silhouette in muted silver. Her phone buzzed once in her clutch, an encrypted notification. She stopped beneath a fountain, the sound masking her voice as she answered. Michael Grant's face appeared on the screen, breathless but composed. Ma'am, it's official. The Hale Tech board approved the merger. Once Jason signs, he'll have executive access to Aurelia's dormant assets. The camera caught Elena's slow exhale, calm and dangerous. The fountain light shimmered over her face, catching the faintest curve of a smile. Then I'll let him sign his downfall. Her tone was barely above a whisper, but it carried the kind of quiet power that made the world tilt. Michael hesitated. You're sure you want to let it go through? Yes, she said. The ink that seals his greed will open my door to justice. As the call ended, she turned toward the busy street. Behind her, a billboard flickered with Jason and Victoria's photo, the future of innovation, the Hale Tech Aurelia merger. Elena watched the slogan dissolve into static, then vanish entirely as the billboard glitched her doing. A micro cliffhanger moment, the audience senses something larger at play. She whispered, almost to the wind. You wanted a merger, Jason. You'll get one with consequences. The sound of city traffic rose, merging with soft orchestral strings as she walked away, the camera holding on the pendant at her neck, the phoenix gleaming under neon. Every humiliation he gave her had just become her blueprint for revenge. The rhythm of the city moved like a heartbeat, steady, alive, unaware of the quiet storm brewing beneath its surface. In a sleek, glass-walled office high above the skyline, Elena sat across from Mr. Harris, the seasoned, ethical lawyer who had once represented her late mentor, Arthur Lynn. The man's presence was calm authority itself, silver hair, sharp glasses, and eyes that seemed to measure the weight of every decision before it was spoken. Stacks of documents lay open on the table, legal blueprints of an empire reborn. Elena leaned forward, her pen tapping once against the page. Clause 17, Mr. Harris said, his voice even. Are you certain you want this included? It could invalidate every merger without direct consent. That's the idea, she replied softly, her tone unflinching. He adjusted his glasses, reading aloud. Any merger signed without the CEO's direct fingerprint authorization is void and triggers automatic federal investigation under Aurelia's compliance bylaws. Elena nodded once. If they think I'm just the designer behind a brand, let them find out the hard way who the architect really is. Mr. Harris studied her for a moment, admiration, faintly softening his usual stoicism. Arthur would be proud, he said. A flicker of emotion crossed her eyes, not sadness, not pride, but the deep, quiet ache of remembrance. He told me to wait until the world built its own noose, she murmured. Jason just handed me the rope. A quiet night in a dim study. Elena, in a tailored black blazer, sits before multiple monitors as numbers roll across screens. Anonymous brokers execute trades, offshore accounts reroute funds, a series of small acquisitions begin under shell identities, Noventus Group, Arcadia Partners, Valacrest Holdings. An unseen hand slides a document across a mahogany desk. A bank seal stamps it, transaction approved, Hale Tech Holdings, 47% share acquired. Elena signs with calm precision. A single ring on her hand, the same one she wore at her wedding, glints under the lamplight. Michael Grant, watching nearby, murmurs, "You're not just buying stock, ma'am. You're buying the foundation under their feet." Elena's response is measured. "No, Michael. I'm reclaiming what they tried to stand on." Late evening, the wind moves softly through the cypress trees, carrying the faint hum of distant traffic. Elena stands before a marble headstone engraved with elegant simplicity, "Arthur Lynn, the builder of quiet empires." She kneels slowly, setting a single black pen beside the tombstone, the same kind Arthur once used to sign her ownership papers. Her reflection shimmers faintly against the polished stone. "You told me to speak when it's final," she says, her voice breaking into a whisper carried by the wind. "Tomorrow I will." For a moment, her composure cracks the vulnerability she hides from the world, flashes across her face like a lightning shadow. Then it's gone. The Aurelia folder sits open on the table beside the correction plan. She slides a new document beneath it. Merger signature authentication, ready for deployment. Outside, the skyline glows. Hailtech's headquarters shines brightest, unaware that half of its light already belongs to her. The camera lingers on the black pen resting atop Arthur's folder, a symbol of everything she's built in silence and everything she's about to reveal. Elena's whisper threads through the silence like prophecy. Power whispers, until it decides to roar. The scene ends on her reflection, half shadow, half flame, the silent storm poised to strike. Grand ballroom pulsed with electric excitement, chandeliers blazing, cameras clicking in staccato bursts, champagne flutes clinking like the prelude to history. The golden banners stretching across the marble pillars read in bold, triumphant lettering, "A.U. Aurelia, Hailtech Unification Gala." Photographers shouted, flashes exploding as Victoria Hale glided down the aisle in a liquid silver gown, her diamond necklace catching every light in the room. She looked every bit the empress of her empire, polished, untouchable, basking in the narrative she'd written for herself. Beside her, Jason Reed beamed with the swagger of a man who believed he'd won everything. "Smile, Jason," one reporter called. "The genius who brought two giants together?" Jason grinned, gripping the pen like a scepter. "Some of us are born to make history," he declared, leaning toward Victoria, "and some just help decorate it." Victoria laughed softly, resting her manicured hand on his arm. "Let's sign, darling. It's time the world saw what real power looks like." At the long mahogany signing table, the Hailtech executives assembled in a gleaming line, murmuring, calculating, rehearsing sound bites in their heads. Behind them, investors whispered numbers that glittered with greed. 20 billion projected valuation, record-breaking expansion, complete market dominance. Then the MC's voice echoed through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a union that will redefine innovation across the globe. Please welcome Hailtech's Vice President, Mr. Jason Reed, an interim co-signatory for Aurelia Holdings." Applause thundered. Jason preened beneath the lights, his reflection towering in the mirrored wall behind him, his favorite view. The MC gestured to the document, gold-rimmed and waiting. "Mr. Reed, if you would." Jason leaned forward, signing with a dramatic flourish, the cameras flashing in perfect rhythm. He turned to the crowd, raising the pen like a sword. "Done. The future is officially ours." The audience erupted again. Victoria kissed his cheek for the cameras, perfectly timed. But before she could say a word, the ballroom doors swung open. Every head turned. A courier stepped in, unassuming in a black uniform, holding a sealed white envelope embossed with Aurelia's gold phoenix crest. He walked steadily toward the stage, ignoring the stares. The MC faltered. Sir, can we help you?" The courier bowed slightly. "Delivery, marked for CEOE, C, only." Jason blinked, irritation flickering. "That's for the board," he said briskly, extending a hand. "I'll take it." But the courier didn't move. "Apologies, sir. My orders are clear. Only Elena Carter-Lynn, alias E.C., can open this." For 2 seconds, the world seemed to stop. The hum of conversation vanished. Then, like a wave, confusion rippled through the room. "E.C.?" a reporter murmured. "Who's that?" Victoria frowned, glancing at Jason. "Is that one of your team?" Jason's smile wavered. "Some clerical nonsense. Probably a system." Before he could finish, The courier turned sharply, placing the envelope at the center of the signing table, directly atop the signed merger contract. The gold phoenix gleamed under the chandelier. Security moved closer, their earpieces crackling. "Orders verified," one guard said into his mic. "Authorization restricted to Elena Carter Lynn only." The murmuring grew louder, restless, a sound like rising wind. Reporters lifted cameras again, sensing blood. "Wait," one whispered. "Did he say Elena Carter Lynn?" Jason's fingers tightened on the table edge. "No," he muttered, trying to laugh. "Impossible. She's—" But the courier's gaze stayed fixed, professional. "Sir, authorization protocols were preloaded into Aurelia's system this morning. Attempting to open it without identity verification will trigger a compliance breach alert." The crowd gasped. Victoria's smile faltered. Jason's hand slipped slightly from the pen. Across the hall, unnoticed at first, a woman in a black suit and minimal jewelry began walking toward the stage, poised, measured, calm. Each step echoed against marble, drawing every camera lens in her direction. The courier looked up. "Ah," he said simply. "She's here." Jason turned and froze. The camera zoomed in on Elena's face as she stopped just beneath the stage lights, her gaze steady, her silence sharper than any weapon. Every investor, every reporter, every rival now held their breath, the tension a wire stretched to breaking. The woman he mocked, the wife he discarded, the failure he laughed at, had just been named the CEO of the empire he thought he owned, and he was standing on her stage. For a long moment, the ballroom was utterly still, the kind of silence that hums before a lightning strike. The courier stepped back. All eyes were fixed on the woman standing beneath the chandelier, her black suit glinting faintly under the golden light. Elena moved forward slowly, every step deliberate, her heels echoing across the marble like a countdown. Cameras flashed, security stiffened. Jason's confident smirk faltered into confusion. The MC fumbled, "Ladies and gentlemen, may I present?" But Elena didn't need an introduction. She reached the table, fingers resting on the sealed envelope with the Aurelia Phoenix crest. Her voice was low but resonant, calm, measured, unshakably certain. "This envelope," she said, "is addressed to me." A ripple of murmurs cut through the crowd. Jason laughed nervously, looking to the reporters. "Oh, this is ridiculous. Elena, what are you doing here?" Ignoring him, she broke the wax seal and unfolded the papers. The sound of crisp parchment tearing open was loud enough to silence the whispers. Her eyes scanned the pages. Then she lifted them, and one by one, the massive LED screens behind the stage flickered to life. Aurelia Holdings official notice CEO. Elena Carter Lynn gasps shot through the hall like sparks. Jason blinked, frozen. No, this is a trick." Elena's voice cut clean through his panic. "No, Jason. This is the truth you never cared to ask about." She turned the documents toward the crowd, the Aurelia seal, glowing on every page, the merger clauses annotated with red corrections, and beneath them, Jason's own forged signatures digitally time-stamped. A collective gasp spread. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. "You see," she continued, her tone even, "this merger you just signed," she held up the contract, "is void. The bylaws were amended last week. No merger is valid without my fingerprint authorization." She turned her gaze to Victoria, whose once perfect posture had wilted. "And you, Miss Hale," Elena said softly, "approved in Mao. Illegal transaction without due diligence. As CEO, I'm triggering an internal investigation effective immediately." The room seemed to tilt. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised. "Elena," Jason sputtered, voice cracking. You can't, you're lying." She cut him off with a small motion to security. Two guards in black suits stepped forward, placing themselves between her and Jason. "I'm not lying," she said. "You emptied my account to marry your boss." Her tones sharpened, quiet but cutting through the noise like glass. "You didn't know I owned hers." The words detonated in the air, slow, echoing, irreversible. Victoria's face went pale. Jason's body jerked as if he'd been struck. "No," he breathed. "No, that's you can't." Elena stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "You forged my authorization to gain access to Aurelia's accounts. That's embezzlement." She nodded toward the big screen, where his Falsified digital signature glowed red. You used insider data to manipulate assets. That's fraud. And you leaked merger details before public filing. That's a federal violation. The last word landed like a gavel. Jason stumbled back, muttering, "This isn't happening." Elena's voice remained calm, almost pitying. "It is. You always said business wasn't for everyone." She tilted her head slightly, a faint, restrained smile touching her lips. "I'd say you married the wrong CEO." Security stepped closer, as murmurs turned to frantic chatter. Victoria's hand trembled as she reached for Jason's arm, but he shook her off, panic widening his eyes. The MC stammered something about a recess, but the press had already surged forward, their flashes blinding, their voices overlapping. "Elena, are you confirming you're the majority owner of both companies? Was this merger a setup? What happens to Hail Tech now?" Elena's composure didn't waver. She met every camera lens with quiet strength. "What happens now?" she said softly. "Correction." She turned to the guards. "Escort Mr. Reed and Miss Hale to legal holding. They'll have time to explain their signatures." The crowd erupted, journalists shouting, investors panicking, flashes firing like a storm. Elena stood at the center, serene amid the chaos. Behind her, the Aurelia logo shimmered, a phoenix rising from golden flames. The woman once humiliated now ruled the room. Her final glance at Jason wasn't filled with hate, only with the calm finality of truth. "Power whispers," she murmured, almost to herself, "until it decides to roar." The lights dimmed slowly on her face, composed, radiant, and utterly untouchable. The chaos in the ballroom had evolved into a storm. Flashes strobed across the marble floor like lightning bolts. Reporters shouted questions over one another. Investors barked into their phones, and the air that once smelled of champagne now reeked of panic. Jason Reed, the man who once thought attention was oxygen, now flinched beneath it. Security officers flanked him on both sides, their grip firm but controlled. The cameras followed as he stumbled toward the exit, his once proud stride broken into something smaller, almost pitiful. "Jason! Jason!" a reporter yelled. "Do you deny the forgery charges?" He didn't answer, couldn't. His jaw locked. Sweat glistened against his temples. The laughter that had once echoed so easily from him now curdled into silence. Beside the stage, Victoria Hale stood frozen, her silver gown catching the light like a cracked mirror. Her PR director whispered frantically, "The investors are demanding immediate refunds. We've lost 40% in an hour." Victoria turned on him, her composure shattering. "Tell them to wait, I can fix this." But another voice from the board table cut her off coldly. "You can't fix what was never yours to sell." She turned toward the sound. It was Mr. Harris, standing beside Elena now, documents in hand. The quiet lawyer who had spent decades guarding Arthur Lynn's empire looked every bit the executioner of legality. The hush returned when Elena Carter Lynn stepped forward. She approached the podium, her steps unhurried, posture straight, the embodiment of grace reclaimed. The Aurelia logo pulsed behind her like a living fire. For a moment she scanned the crowd, the same crowd that had once laughed at her downfall, and her gaze was neither bitter nor cruel. It was calm, complete. She leaned into the microphone, voice low but resonant, the kind that made even chaos listen. "When I was younger," she began, "a man I respected told me something I never forgot. Real wealth isn't loud. It builds." Her eyes flicked briefly toward Jason, who was being led through the side doors, his wrists loosely bound. "And when betrayal enters a place of creation, it doesn't destroy it. It only exposes what was already rotting." Every word landed like poetry carved in steel. Reporters fell silent. Cameras zoomed closer. Investors, the same ones who'd once doubted her, now leaned forward in reverent disbelief. "This company," she continued, gesturing to the banners that once bore Hailtech's insignia, "was built on integrity, innovation, and quiet resilience. That hasn't changed. It only lost its way when arrogance mistook volume for vision." Her tone carried no venom. It was not revenge. It was correction. A slow applause began from the back of the hall, hesitant, then growing, until the entire room echoed with it. Even some former Hailtech employees joined, their expressions a mixture of awe and relief. Elena's lips curved faintly, but her eyes glistened. She wasn't smiling out of triumph, it was release. "Arthur Lynn once told me, she said softly. That power whispers until it decides to roar. Today, it whispered long enough. She stepped away from the podium, and as the applause thundered, the camera caught her passing by Victoria, now slumped in a chair, mascara streaked, clutching a shattered image of her former empire. Jason, glimpsed one last time through the glass doors, looked back over his shoulder, not at Victoria, not at the reporters, but at Elena. The woman he'd mocked as a failure now stood where he could never return. The audience could feel it, poetic justice complete. As the lights dimmed and the cameras faded, Elena looked toward the empty front row where once she'd sat as a silent wife and whispered under her breath, "It's over, Arthur. The correction is complete." The faint sound of clapping continued long after she left the stage. The world woke up to her story. Screens across news networks blazed with headlines that rippled through every corridor of power. Secret billionaire CEO exposes husband's $20 million theft hail attack. Board resigns. The woman behind Aurelia, Elena Carter-Lynn, the invisible architect of empires. Betrayal, billions, and the quietest revenge in corporate history. Clips from the gala replayed in slow motion. Elena standing firm beneath the golden lights, Jason's face draining of confidence, Victoria's trembling silence. The moment the Aurelia logo ignited behind its true owner. The footage was everywhere. The woman who had once been mocked for staying in the kitchen had rewritten the recipe for poetic justice. Jason Reed, sitting in the half-lit corner of a rundown motel. The peeling wallpaper, the buzzing neon sign outside, and the stale odor of old smoke were a brutal contrast to the penthouse he'd once bragged about. His laptop screen glowed weakly before him, illuminating the digital wreckage of his former life-freezing bank accounts, terminated contracts, legal summons piling in his inbox. He scrolled numbly through the headlines. Hailtech. Merger declared, fraudulent investigation ongoing. Jason Reed, named in embezzlement and forgery inquiry. His reflection stared back at him from the black screen. Hollow eyes, stubble on his chin, the expensive watch still clinging to his wrist like a cruel reminder of what he'd lost. His hand trembled as he reached for his phone. After a long, shuddering breath, he dialed her number. The tone rang once, twice, then clicked. Elena. Her name came out barely above a whisper, heavy with desperation. "Please, don't hang up. I just need to talk." For a moment there was silence, the kind that stretches eternity thin. Then her calm, composed voice answered. "I was wondering when you'd call." Jason swallowed hard. "You can't just erase me like this." His voice cracked, raw and pleading. "You can't. I made mistakes, but you loved me once. Doesn't that count for something?" Her voice didn't rise. It didn't tremble. It was softer than he remembered, almost kind, but cold beneath the surface. "I didn't erase you, Jason," she said. "You did that yourself the day you stole from the one person who built your dreams." He blinked, tears breaking loose, his voice dissolving into broken laughter. "You always were better with words." On her end, the silence carried meaning, not cruelty, not victory, just quiet truth. "I wish you peace," she said simply. Then the line clicked. Jason stared at the phone, the empty dial tone humming through the room. For a moment he just sat there, the echo of her voice looping in his mind, the one truth he couldn't twist, couldn't spin, couldn't charm. The man who thought he'd traded up for power now sat surrounded by receipts of his own downfall. Elena standing by her office window, the city skyline stretching before her, vast, brilliant, alive. The sun glinted off the Aurelia Tower's gold emblem. She placed her phone down gently beside a framed photograph. Arthur Lynn and her at Aurelia's groundbreaking ceremony, both smiling. Her voice was a whisper, half prayer, half vow. "Power doesn't destroy, it remembers." The camera pulled back slowly, her figure outlined against the rising dawn, the empire reborn in silence. Morning sunlight streamed through the Aurelia Tower's glass facade, turning the boardroom into a cathedral of light. The tension of headlines and betrayals had faded, replaced now with quiet purpose. Elena stood before a group of journalists and partners, her composure serene yet resolute. Behind her, a banner read, "The Lynn Foundation for Women Entrepreneurs Seed Fund, $20 million. Michael, standing beside her, whispered, "$20 million, the exact amount he stole." Elena smiled faintly. He thought money was power. she said, eyes gleaming with calm conviction. I'll turn his greed into opportunity. Gasps rippled through the room, not from scandal, but reverence. The same number that once symbolized theft, betrayal, and humiliation now pulsed with a new life, redemption through creation. She stepped to the podium. This foundation isn't about revenge, she said softly. It's about rebuilding the kind of world that doesn't force women to beg for belief. Images flashed on the projector, single mothers baking from home, young girls sketching business ideas in notebooks, widows rebuilding shops from ashes. Her tone was steady, but her eyes shimmered every sentence of vow stitched with purpose. Every grant we give will remind the world that failure isn't final, that strength, once dismissed, can change entire economies. Michael glanced at her, his voice low, admiring. Arthur would be proud. Elena turned toward the window where sunlight cut across the skyline like a promise. He taught me that legacies aren't measured by headlines, but by who stands taller because of you. Outside, the Aurelia Tower reflected her reflection, no longer hidden, no longer shadowed by betrayal. The Lynn Foundation's first public event was alive with warmth, laughter, press flashes, the soft hum of promise. Entrepreneurs shared stories of survival and triumph, their faces glowing under golden lights. Elena stood near the stage, elegant in white, speaking gently with a group of young founders when the murmurs began. A figure had appeared at the entrance. Jason. Thinner, pale, suit hanging loose like borrowed skin. He hesitated under the glow of cameras, then stumbled forward until he was at her feet, the same woman he once mocked before the world. The crowd parted in stunned silence. Elena, his voice cracked, broken by guilt and exhaustion. Please, forgive me. I lost everything. The cameras clicked in bursts, every flash freezing his fall from arrogance to ashes. Elena looked down at him for a long moment, not with anger, not even pity, but something quieter. She stepped closer, her tone calm, but cutting through the air like truth itself. So did I once, she said softly, but I rebuilt without stealing. That's the difference. The weight of her words lingered, not vengeance, but balance. Justice that needed no spectacle. Security approached, waiting for her nod. She gave it gently. Jason was lifted to his feet and escorted away, his plea swallowed by the sound of applause returning to the room. Elena turned back to the stage, her expression serene. Behind her, the foundation's banner read, Rebuild, Redefine, Rise. For a brief moment, she looked toward the audience and smiled, not for victory, but for peace. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the serene expanse of Aurelia's top floor. Morning light washed across the glass walls, casting gold over the city that once doubted her. The hum of quiet success filled the air, purposeful, steady, alive. Elena stepped into her office, her presence calm but commanding, every movement threaded with quiet grace. On her desk, fresh reports were stacked neatly beside a vase of white orchids, Arthur's favorite. Michael entered with a file in hand, his tone composed but tinged with satisfaction. Ma'am, he said, Victoria Hale just filed for bankruptcy, complete liquidation within 30 days. Elena paused by the window, eyes tracing the skyline where Hale Tech's tower once loomed like a shadow. Now it stood half-lit, uncertain, a monument to arrogance undone. A faint smile curved her lips. Then let's acquire Hale Tech, she said softly. But this time, we'll rebuild it right. Her words weren't revenge, they were redemption, measured and deliberate. Every syllable felt like closure sealed with purpose. Michael nodded, admiration flickering in his gaze. Arthur would have said the same. Elena turned back to her desk. There, placed with care, lay something unexpected, the old pen she'd left at Arthur's grave. A courier's card rested beside it, no sender name, only a handwritten note in neat, familiar script. You spoke, and the world listened. She ran her fingers over the pen, emotion rippling quietly beneath her calm exterior. Outside, the skyline glowed, Aurelia's name reflected in the mirrored glass of every nearby tower, the empire she built, now whispering her legacy in light. The camera slowly pulled back, her silhouette merging with the sunrise. The quiet billionaire who crushed betrayal with grace and rebuilt the world in her own image.